I'm going to start from the very beginning, and not the Big Bang, but I'm going to start at a place not long after that, which is about the time I was born, when the space. Yeah, very close. When we started having, first thing, spacecraft outer space, it was, for me as a kid, it was so exciting. I couldn't believe that people would actually build spaceships that actually took electronic pictures and sent them to a radio beam down to big antennas on Earth to newspapers that would be printed, and I could get it in my own house. Newspapers with pictures of the moon and other places. To me, it was astounding stuff. Later on, they would go to Mercury, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter. This was just unbelievable stuff. And within, this is the amazing thing, it was just less than 20 years, 15 years, they were sending people to the moon. The Soviet Union landed beautiful missions to the surface of Venus, and we finally sent a vehicle to land on the surface of Mars. Me, as a kid growing up, this is a dream come true. How could I possibly get involved with something so exciting? In fact, but before this all happened, our view of the planets is that they were habitable places. They're, in fact, habited with canals, maybe, and civilizations that could come and invade Earth. Wouldn't that be exciting? Ooh, gives me chills thinking about it. Scientists, musicians, authors, writers, they gave us wonderful visions of what these unseen worlds might look like. This is what we called outer space. The most amazing thing was that we actually believed it. And so, but just a few years later, we sent missions to Mars, the past Mariner 4, then later Mariner 9 that went into orbit, took pictures looking down, and instead of a place that had canals and cities, we saw places that kind of look a bit like the moon, big pot marks, big holes, gray, dusty, rocky environments. And I was quite shocked. Later on, the two Viking missions, Viking 1 and Viking 2, in 1976, they invaded Mars about the same time Charlie's Angels invaded our homes. Landed there and just revolutions. Now, what Viking did for me was this is something you can't do any other way. You have to land there and look out and see and give you a sense of scale. Now, the cameras are about eye level, so it almost feels like you're there. So it gave a sense of presence that you couldn't get any other way. But despite these wonderful pictures, I was a little struck by the plainness of the place. I was, to be honest with you, a bit disappointed. I really did have very high hopes for this place. Now, many scientists had concluded that, there's probably not canals there, but I was actually ready for them. I was really ready. In fact, they looked very familiar in places like Mojave, perhaps Sudbury, or it just looked too familiar, But maybe we hadn't gone far enough. We hadn't gone out to the outer planets. We haven't looked there. But maybe, and this is what kept me awake at night, maybe Earth was all by itself, and we were alone, and we were the only life around. Now that really made me sad to think about that. That Earth spinning around the sun, all by ourselves, surrounded by huge, vast nothingness. That would be too much. But then, 1979, 80, 81, 82, the Voyager spacecraft that had been launched in 1977, just after out of high school, flew by at 90,000 kilometers an hour past first Jupiter, then Saturn, taking these fantastic images that were of worlds and moons that really lived up to my expectation of what planets should look like. At the same time, I was arriving in California to go to school at Caltech, a little bit slower than 90,000 miles an hour by train, and I was able to see with my own eyes what other people were seeing. And we were surrounded by planetary scientists, people who were aghast, a gap, mouths wide open, looking at these wonderful pictures, not just of the clouds of Jupiter, but big icy balls that might have water underneath them, whole moons that were nothing but sulfur and lava and exploding volcanic eruptions going on right before our very face. Carl Sagan was there. He was looking and taking bets about whether or not Titan had a organic atmosphere. It was an amazing time. I convinced myself then and there that's what I wanted to do. That's so cool. And JPL was just up the street. So in about 3 years later, I managed to get hired as an electrical engineer working on the Galileo project to Jupiter at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. Very cool. I was suddenly around the very people who invented space travel. The people who invented robots that went into outer space, the people I was looking at as a kid, looking at my magazines. It was amazing. And what's more, I was able to be taught by many of them on how to do this. 13 years later, I got my chance to build my own rocket, my own spacecraft. Mars Pathfinder landed, was a mission to land a little lander, bounce it on the surface of Mars, and drive a little rover. And this was the first landing on Mars more than 20 years after the Vikings landed. So there was a huge gap. So we were actually new young pioneers to make this happen. So on the 4th of July, 1997, we finally got there. And we landed little Sojourner rover inside Mars Pathfinder.
Is barely visible. That's a very good sign, everybody.
I believe I have a firm signal.
Well, although we're very happy up here, let's go home. We can't go home yet.
No, we can't go home yet. How did I know about the theme of this thing? I don't know. Okay, 2 years later, we launched another vehicle called Mars Polar Lander. There it is. Mars Polar Lander was a very low-cost mission, which turned out to be a very good thing because this mission, one of the things many things we did with this mission was to save money, was that we didn't instrument it so it could communicate during entry, descent, landing, so we couldn't monitor it. So when the radio was turned off in late 1999, and just minutes before landing, that was the last we ever heard from it. We haven't found it. It was lost. It's been lost forever. In fact, we've hunted with cameras and images. We still can't find the darn thing. It's there somewhere. Let me know if you find it. So we had to do something. We had to do something, and quick. What we did was we came up with the idea of modifying Pathfinder. A friend of mine and I came up with and conceived the idea, and we got a team together, and we put together in only 3 years 2 vehicles, Spirit and Opportunity, and they were launched in 2004. See if I can get this thing to work. There we go. First, we landed Spirit on January 4th, and then we did Opportunity 3 weeks, almost to the minute later.
Seeing it on the LTP.
Okay, well, you can see we're obviously good at this because we're so calm and collected, right? But you know, going to Mars has been a wonderful experience. But one of the things that people don't know about robotic spacecraft is that we actually, people think we send the robots there and they do our work for us, and then we find out how they did. That's actually how it really works. But what really happens is that we become part of those vehicles. The stereo cameras are our eyes. The arm and its tools are our arm. The wheels are our feet. We travel along the surface of Mars, with our geologists and geochemists following with us, telling us what we're looking as we're driving along. Now, one of the things that they tell us, the scientists tell us, and all of you know, is that Earth and Mars were formed together 4.5 billion years ago. We're all part of the same solar system. That's when the solar system started. It was an exciting time for both planets because they both got impacted by rocks. They both went through the same environment. But Mars has actually shown us, as we've gone back, that Mars has actually signs that water had formed on Mars. Now, on Earth, we've had water for a very long time. But on Mars, when we saw these images, we didn't know what we were looking at. We thought that maybe it might be lava flow. But one thing about Mars that you can say, that we do know now, is that if there was ever an atmosphere of Mars, it's not there now. It's only 1% of Earth's atmosphere today. It's very cold. It's very, very dry. The atmosphere has been blown away by the solar wind. There's no magnetic field on Mars to keep the wind from blowing the atmosphere protected. There's no Van Allen belts to knock the solar particles away. And in fact, the inside of Mars has cooled. Mars doesn't have a moon that rotates around the planet that keeps the innards warm like we have here on this planet. So there's no plate tectonics on Mars. There is volcanoes that on Mars have really all but gone silent. While we've been exploring Mars, though, we've learned something else about Earth. Over the last 20 to 25 years, we've learned that life on Earth got started very early. What's more, we've also discovered that we're part of this vast network of living cells and organisms. Cells that started early on have blossomed on this planet over the last 3.5 billion years. And in fact, there's life everywhere, in the sky, under the earth, in the air, in the water, and in your gut. And what's more, these cells are our cousins. We're walking colonies. Those critters in your gut are your cousins. And currently, they've had a long stay over. So life has become ubiquitous on this planet, and and we're part of it. We are part of this fantastic web of life. Early on, we know that Mars and Earth both went through. Now we believe that Mars has a very was now we believe to be warm and wetter. At the same time, Earth was getting started here on Earth, and it's in fact possible that life, that the conditions on Mars may have been more habitable than even Earth was early on. If life got started here on Earth, why couldn't it have started on Mars too? We know life got started. We believe it started on this planet, but why not Mars? We also have looked at other places. Mars is not the only place we think was wet. This is a cutaway of Europa. Europa has these fantastic oceans. These oceans are perfect places, possibly, for life to have evolved. We just don't know. Is it possible that Mars is an island? Now, 150 years ago, Charles Darwin discovered that all the islands on our world have been connected with life, have traveled from place to place in very rare circumstances. Turtles, birds, small animals have traveled, plants from island to island. Could it be that we get the same thing happen between the planets? Well, about 20 years ago, we started discovering more and more meteors that had a very strange property. Inside those meteors was trapped gas that had the carbon dioxide composition that matched Mars. How about that? These were meteors that we found on Earth that came from Mars. But how did they get there? This particular rock was found in 1984 in Antarctica. After now analyzing the rock, we found that this rock was 4 billion years old. Very, very old rock. This rock lived on Mars most of its life until about 15 million years ago. That's before humans, but after the dinosaurs. A big asteroid impact came along and launched it up into outer space. And for the remaining 15 million years, it circled the sun. Then, about the end of the last ice age, about 13,000 years ago, it landed in Antarctica, only to be picked up in 1984. Cool, huh? What a story. Wow. Now, one of the things that a group of scientists at NASA came along and said, after looking at this carefully, they thought they saw carbonate globules that might be signs of early, very primitive nanobacteria in the rock itself. And it's quite clear that it was not contaminants, it was stuff in the rock itself. At first, scientists were very excited, except over time, we realized that there were non-biological explanations for where this came from. So while not proving that there's life on Mars, this rock did prove to us that it's possible for life to travel from place to place in the solar system. And in fact, back 65 million years ago, when a big asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula and knocked out millions of tons of Earth rock. We know that life lives in rock. In fact, there's massive amount of single-cell organisms deep below our feet right now. So that rock is launched, hit the sun, all the planets, to the outer planets, and to Mars. And it's done this hundreds of times over the life history of Earth. What's more, Mars itself has had similar impacts thousands of times over its life, sending rocks from Mars sprinkled all over the solar system, including Earth. Could it be that life started on Mars and came here even before life started on this planet, and that all of you are Martians? You especially. We don't know. All evidence says that life started on Earth. But we have started the journey to answer these questions. Last August 5th, you might remember, we landed Curiosity Rover. We lowered it to the ground using a new landing trick that we came up with about just after the polar lander landed, of lowering it on ropes to the ground on its wheels. In fact, that's the size of the wheel right there. That's the actual size. This is a big rover. It's got laboratories in it. You know, that never gets old. Well, that doesn't get old, but I do. It's scary to look at myself so gray. So what happened? Okay, last January, we were able to put a drill into the surface of Mars. We pulled that gray stuff out. That gray rock, we then analyzed it. This is a rock that we've now confirmed. It was a phyllosilicate clay that is formed under wet, warm conditions on Mars. We took that material and analyzed it. 4 weeks ago, we sent that data back, and we were able to announce to the world that we had proven that beyond doubt, Mars at one time was habitable for life. In fact, the rock itself has energy in it that would allow life to live even if you put it in there right now. So, right now we're stuck here. We're now sitting at Yellowknife Bay, and we've been exploring this ever since. The next week, Mars goes behind the sun. We won't talk to it for a whole month, and then after that, we're going to start exploring. First, Mount Sharp. And then we'll head off to the right there into this valley, right up there. And hopefully, if we're lucky, in the next 2 years of exploration, we might find chemical traces of our cousins. So perhaps we're going home. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.